It all began at a casual dinner party, one of those low-key gatherings where friends sip wine and swap stories. Rebecca and I were hosting, and the small group of close friends had gathered in our living room, laughter and conversation filling the air. Her best friend, Melanie, was in high spirits that evening. She was always the life of the party, quick with a joke and always a glass of wine in hand. But tonight, something was different. She was looser, her laughter more raucous than usual. At one point, Rebecca disappeared into the kitchen to grab more appetizers, leaving me alone with Melanie and a few others. Melanie leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a mock whisper. "You're so lucky to have Rebecca," she said, grinning. "I know I am," I replied, smiling. Melanie smirked, twirling her wine glass. "She's such a good liar, though, isn't she?" The comment caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, nothing," Melanie said quickly, waving a dismissive hand. "I'm just saying, she's good at keeping secrets. You know how she is." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Before I could press further, Rebecca reappeared, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Melanie straightened up, her demeanor shifting as if nothing had happened. But for the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to her words than she let on. Later that night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, I replayed Melanie's comment in my mind. Rebecca was her usual self, humming softly as she cleaned up the kitchen. "What did Melanie mean earlier?" I asked casually. Rebecca glanced at me, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "She said you're good at keeping secrets." Rebecca laughed, though it sounded forced. "Melanie says all sorts of things when she's had too much wine. Don't read too much into it." Her dismissal only heightened my curiosity. The next day, I couldn't let it go. Melanie's words, paired with Rebecca's reaction, felt like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. Rebecca and I had always been open with each other, or so I thought. I decided to call Melanie, framing it as a casual follow-up. "Hey, thanks for coming over last night," I said. "Of course." "It was a great time," Melanie replied, her voice cheerful. "Listen," I said, choosing my words carefully. "You mentioned something last night about Rebecca being good at keeping secrets. What did you mean by that?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh," Melanie said finally, her tone suddenly cautious. "I shouldn't have said that." "Why not?" I pressed, my chest tightening. "It's not my place," she said quickly. Forget I said anything. But her hesitation only deepened my suspicions. "Melanie, please," I said, my voice firm. "If there's something I need to know, you have to tell me." She hesitated again, then sighed. "It's nothing, really. Just, you should talk to Rebecca. She's the one who should explain." Her words left me with more questions than answers. That evening, I confronted Rebecca again. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. She looked up from her book, her expression confused. "What are you talking about?" "Melanie's comment last night," I said. "And the way she clowned up when I asked her about it today. It's obvious she knows something." "So what is it?" Rebecca set her book down, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "Are you seriously grilling me over something Melanie said when she was drunk?" she asked. "I'm not grilling you," I replied. "But it feels like you're hiding something." Rebecca sighed, her frustration evident. "I'm not hiding anything, Daniel. Melanie likes to stir the pot sometimes. Don't let her get into your head." Her words sounded reasonable, but the doubt lingered. That night, as Rebecca slept, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Was I overreacting? Or was there something Rebecca didn't want me to know? I resolved to dig deeper. The following day, the nagging doubt persisted. Rebecca's reassurance had done little to ease my mind, and Melanie's words echoed in my head like a warning I couldn't ignore. If Rebecca wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd have to find it myself. That evening, while Rebecca was in the shower, I took the opportunity to check her phone. It wasn't something I'd ever done before. Our relationship had always been built on trust, but now, I wasn't sure what to believe. Her phone was locked, but I knew her passcode. I opened it, my hands trembling as I scrolled through her recent messages and call logs. At first, everything seemed normal. Conversations with her family, work colleagues, and friends filled the screen. But then, I noticed a thread with someone named Lauren. I didn't recognize the name, and the messages struck me as odd. Lauren, are you still good for tomorrow? Same time? Rebecca, yes, but we have to be careful. He's been asking questions. Lauren, got it. I'll handle everything on my end. My stomach churned as I read the exchange. Who was Lauren? And what were they planning? I quickly took screenshots of the messages and returned the phone to its original place just as the shower turned off. The next day, I called Marcus. Marcus was an old friend who had transitioned from working in law enforcement to running his own private investigation business. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was him. What's going on? He asked when I explained the situation. I don't know, I admitted. But something isn't right. Rebecca's been acting strange, and now there's this person, Lauren, who she's been messaging about something. Marcus paused for a moment. Do you have any other details about Lauren? A last name? Phone number? Just the messages, I said, forwarding him the screenshots. Leave it with me, Marcus said. I'll dig into it. While Marcus investigated, I tried to act normal around Rebecca. But every conversation felt like a game of chess, every smile hiding 1,000 questions I couldn't bring myself to ask. Are you okay? She asked one evening, her brow furrowed. Just tired, I said, forcing a smile. But inside, I was anything but okay. A few days later, Marcus called with an update. Lauren's real name is Lauren Pierce, he said. She's a real estate agent, one with a history of shady dealings. What kind of shady dealings? I asked, my chest tightening. She's been involved in several lawsuits over fraudulent property sales, Marcus said. And she's connected to a company that's been flagged for laundering money through real estate deals. I leaned against the counter, the weight of his words sinking in. Do you think Rebecca's involved in this? I asked. It's hard to say, Marcus replied. But if she's working with Lauren, it's not a good sign. That evening, I decided to follow Rebecca. She had mentioned meeting Melanie for drinks after work, but after what I'd learned, I wasn't convinced that was true. Around 6 p.m., she left the house, dressed sharply and carrying a large tote bag. I waited a few minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out, keeping a safe distance as I followed her car. To my surprise, she didn't drive toward Melanie's neighborhood or any of the usual bars they frequented. Instead, she headed toward the outskirts of town, where a cluster of commercial properties lined a quiet road. She pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript office building and got out, her tote bag slung over her shoulder. I parked across the street, my heart pounding as I watched her enter the building. After waiting for a few minutes, I decided to get closer. The building had tinted windows, making it impossible to see inside, but I noticed a side door left ajar. I slipped inside, careful to stay out of sight. Voices echoed faintly from a room down the hall, and I crept closer, straining to hear. Rebecca's voice was unmistakable. "This needs to be the last time," she said, her tone sharp. Lauren's voice followed. "Relax. Once we are done with this, it's over." "What if he finds out?" Rebecca asked, her voice tinged with worry. Lauren laughed softly. "He won't. Not unless you tell him." I backed away, my mind racing. What were they talking about? And how long had Rebecca been keeping this from me? The sound of footsteps approaching snapped me out of my thoughts. I slipped out of the building and back to my car, my heart hammering in my chest. That night, Rebecca came home as if nothing had happened. "How was Melanie?" I asked casually as she kicked off her shoes. "She's good," Rebecca replied with a smile. "We just talked and caught up." Her lie felt like a slap. "Anything interesting happen?" I pressed. "Nope," she said, heading to the kitchen. "Just the usual." I watched her, my doubt solidifying into a painful certainty. Whatever Rebecca was hiding, it wasn't small. That night, as Rebecca slept, I lay wide awake, her lies replaying in my mind. The meeting with Lauren wasn't just suspicious, it was calculated. Her demeanor afterward, calm and collected, only made the deception harder to stomach. The next morning, I called Marcus again, sharing what I'd overheard in the office building. They said this would be the last time, and Rebecca sounded nervous, I said, pacing the living room. Marcus exhaled sharply. "That's a red flag. It sounds like she's in deeper than she wants to be." "What do I do?" I asked. "For now, keep an eye on her," Marcus said. "And I'll dig into Lauren's recent activity. If they're working on something big, there's going to be a paper trail." Over the next few days, I watched Rebecca more closely than ever. She went about her routines as if nothing had changed: work, errands, evenings on the couch with me. But her phone rarely left her side, and I noticed her texting more frequently than usual. I decided to check her phone again when the opportunity arose. Late one evening, as Rebecca showered, I unlocked her phone and opened her messages with Lauren. The latest exchange sent chills down my spine. "Lauren, the property will be ready for the handoff tomorrow. Make sure the transfer is clean. Rebecca, I'll take care of it. No loose ends." Property? Handoff? Transfer? I took screenshots of the messages and sent them to Marcus. The next morning, Marcus called. "Whatever they're doing, it involves a property sale," he said. "Lauren's been linked to several fraudulent transactions recently. They use fake buyers and sellers to launder money through real estate deals. Do you think Rebecca's helping her with this?" I asked, my chest tightening. "It's possible," Marcus said. "If she's facilitating transfers or covering tracks, she's a key part of the operation." I leaned against the counter, my mind spinning. "What happens if they get caught?" I asked. "If Rebecca's complicit, she could face serious charges," Marcus said grimly. "But if she's being coerced, there's a chance she could cooperate to avoid prosecution." That evening, Rebecca left the house again, claiming she had a late meeting with a client. I followed her car, keeping a safe distance as she drove to a high-end residential neighborhood. She parked outside a large, partially constructed house and got out, carrying a file folder. Lauren was already there, standing by the front door with two other people, a man and a woman I didn't recognize. They greeted Rebecca warmly, but the tension in their body language was clear. I parked down the street and watched as they entered the house. After waiting for a few minutes, I crept closer, staying in the shadows. I found an open window on the side of the house and crouched beneath it, straining to hear their conversation. The man's voice was sharp and authoritative. "This needs to go off without a hitch. If anyone starts asking questions, we are all screwed." Lauren replied, "We've covered our tracks. The buyers are offshore accounts, nothing will point back to us." Rebecca spoke next, her voice hesitant. "And the transfer? It's going through tomorrow?" "Yes," the man said. "And you'll make sure everything looks legitimate?" My stomach churned. Rebecca wasn't just involved, she was actively participating. I stepped away from the window, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. As I walked back to my car, I spotted Marcus parked a block away. I had called him earlier, and he'd agreed to come and observe from a distance. I slid into his passenger seat, shaking my head. She's in over her head. Marcus nodded, his expression grim. We'll need proof to take this to the authorities. If we can expose the entire operation, Rebecca might be able to cut a deal. That night, I confronted Rebecca. How was your meeting? I asked as she walked through the door. Productive, she said with a smile. Her casual response made my blood boil. I know about the property, I said, my voice steady. I know about the transfer tomorrow. And I know you've been working with Lauren on something illegal. Rebecca froze, her face draining of color. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. Don't lie to me, I said sharply. I followed you tonight. I heard everything. Her hands shook as she set her bag down. Daniel, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded. Because it looks like you're helping launder money. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to get involved. Lauren came to me months ago, saying she needed help with a few transactions. She made it sound harmless at first, but then I realized what she was really doing. And you didn't stop? I asked, my voice rising. She threatened me, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. She said if I backed out, she'd ruin me. She has connections, Daniel. I was scared. Her confession felt like a punch to the gut. You should have come to me, I said. We could have figured this out together. I didn't want to drag you into this, she whispered. I thought I could fix it on my own. I shook my head, the weight of her words pressing down on me. It's too late for that now. The next morning, I called Marcus. We need to stop this transfer, I said. And we need to take Lauren down. Marcus's voice was firm. Then we'll set a trap. Marcus's plan was bold but necessary. We would gather hard evidence during the transfer Rebecca and Lauren had planned. By recording their actions and providing clear documentation of their fraudulent transaction, we could turn everything over to the authorities. Rebecca was hesitant to cooperate. Lauren will know if something's off, she said, her voice trembling. If she suspects anything, she won't just come after me. She'll come after you too. She won't get the chance, Marcus said firmly. We'll have law enforcement ready to intervene as soon as we have enough to implicate her. Rebecca hesitated, glancing at me. Are you sure about this? I nodded, my voice steady. It's the only way to end this. The next day, Rebecca met Lauren at a luxury office suite downtown. The property transfer was scheduled to take place in a private conference room where they would finalize the paperwork. Marcus equipped Rebecca with a discreet recording device and a small camera hidden in her necklace. The plan was simple. She would act as though everything was proceeding as normal while collecting as much evidence as possible. I parked across the street, my heart pounding as I listened to the audio feed from the recording device. Inside the conference room, Lauren was all business. The buyers are offshore, so the funds will pass through 2 intermediary accounts before landing in the shell company, she explained, laying out the paperwork. The man from the meeting at the house, identified as Greg, was also present, his demeanor cold and calculating. Make sure the signatures match, Greg said, sliding a folder toward Rebecca. If anything looks off, it'll raise flags. Rebecca kept her voice steady. Understood. As the transfer progressed, Rebecca managed to steer the conversation toward Lauren's broader operations. How do you keep all of this hidden? She asked, her tone curious but casual. Lauren smirked. That's the beauty of it. Real estate is the perfect cover. People see a sale, they don't ask questions. As long as the money flows and the paperwork looks clean, no one notices. Her arrogance was palpable, and my anger simmered as I listened. After an hour, Lauren and Greg finalized the transfer. Rebecca handed over the signed documents, and Lauren slid a USB drive across the table. "This has all the digital records," Lauren said. "Once the funds clear, destroy it." Rebecca hesitated but nodded, slipping the drive into her bag. "That's it," Greg said, standing. "We are done here." Lauren smiled, her tone smug. "Another flawless job. You're finally getting the hang of this, Rebecca." The meeting ended, and Rebecca left the office, her hands trembling as she clutched her bag. Marcus and I were waiting in the surveillance van nearby. "You did great," Marcus said as she climbed inside. "I feel sick," Rebecca whispered. "Lauren thinks she's untouchable." "She won't be for long," Marcus said, retrieving the recording device and the USB drive. "The evidence we collected was damning." The recording captured Lauren detailing her operation, and the USB drive contained a treasure trove of incriminating files. Marcus reviewed the documents, finding clear evidence of fraudulent transactions, shell companies, and illegal money transfers. "This is more than enough to take them down," Marcus said. That evening, I sat with Rebecca in the living room, the tension between us finally breaking as we prepared to turn the evidence over to the authorities. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I should have come to you sooner. I should have trusted you." I took her hands in mine, my voice soft but firm. "You made a mistake, Rebecca. But what matters is that you're trying to make it right." She nodded, her tears falling onto her lap. The next day, Marcus and I met with law enforcement, handing over the evidence. The investigators were stunned by the extent of Lauren's operation. "This is one of the cleanest cases we've ever seen," the lead detective said. "We'll move quickly to bring her and her associates in." That evening, Rebecca received a text from Lauren. "Lauren, everything cleared. Great job today. Let's talk about the next project soon." Rebecca showed me the message, her face pale. "This has to end," she said. "It will," I assured her. "Sooner than she thinks." The following morning, law enforcement raided Lauren's office, arresting her and Greg on charges of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The evidence Rebecca had helped gather was pivotal in securing their arrests, and investigators assured us that Rebecca's cooperation would work heavily in her favor. "She's a witness, not a suspect," the detective told me. She did the right thing. Rebecca and I sat in the quiet of our living room that evening, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting. "It's over," she said softly. I nodded, pulling her into a hug. "It's over." The road to rebuilding our marriage wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, it felt like we had a chance to start fresh. With Lauren and her associates behind bars, the immediate danger was over. But the fallout of Rebecca's involvement still loomed over us like a dark cloud. Trust had been fractured, and the road to rebuilding it felt daunting. Rebecca's relief was palpable in the days following the arrests, but so was her guilt. She avoided eye contact when we spoke and threw herself into cleaning the house, cooking elaborate meals, and finding small ways to make up for what had happened. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, I broke the silence. "You don't have to keep trying to prove yourself," I said gently. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I feel like I do. After everything I've done. I don't know how to make it right." I reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "It's not about making it right overnight. It's about showing up every day and being honest with each other." She nodded, her tears spilling over as she whispered, "I'll do whatever it takes." A few days later, Marcus called with an update on the investigation. "Lauren's singing like a bird," he said. "She's trying to cut a deal by giving up her contacts and detailing the entire operation." "Does that put Rebecca in the clear?" I asked. "Absolutely," Marcus said. "The authorities see her as a key witness, not a criminal. They're grateful for her cooperation, and it's likely she won't face any charges." The news was a huge relief, but it didn't erase the damage done to Rebecca's career. Rebecca resigned from her job shortly after Lauren's arrest. The association with a criminal operation, even as an unwilling participant, had left her reputation in tatters. "It's better this way," she said one evening, her voice heavy. "I need a fresh start." "What will you do?" I asked. She shrugged, a faint glimmer of determination in her eyes. "Something different. Something meaningful. I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." Meanwhile, I wrestled with my own emotions. The betrayal I'd felt when I first discovered Rebecca's secret still lingered, like a bruise that hadn't fully healed. Therapy helped us navigate the aftermath, providing a space to air our grievances and work through the pain. "I was scared of disappointing you," Rebecca admitted during one session. "I thought if you knew the truth, you'd leave me." "I can't lie and say it didn't hurt," I replied. "But what hurt more was feeling like you didn't trust me enough to come to me." Our therapist nodded. "Trust is fragile, but it can be rebuilt. The fact that you're both here, willing to work through this, speaks volumes." Months passed, and life began to take on a semblance of normalcy. Rebecca found a part-time job at a local community center, helping with outreach programs and organizing events. It wasn't as glamorous as her previous position, but it gave her a sense of purpose. "I feel like I'm actually helping people," she said one evening, a rare smile lighting up her face. "That's what matters," I said, proud of her resilience. One evening, Marcus stopped by to check in. "I heard Rebecca's been cleared completely," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "She has," I said. "Thanks to you." Marcus waved off the compliment. "I'm just glad we got to her in time. It could have been a lot worse." Rebecca joined us, offering Marcus a warm smile. "I can't thank you enough for everything you did," she said. "Just doing my job," Marcus replied. "But you did the hard part, facing the truth and fixing it." That night, Rebecca and I sat on the couch, a blanket draped over our laps as we watched a movie. For the first time in months, the silence between us felt comfortable, not strained. "I'm glad we are still here," she said softly, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Me too," I replied, kissing her forehead. Our journey wasn't perfect, and the scars of what had happened would always be a part of us. But as we moved forward, we did so with a renewed commitment to honesty, trust, and forgiveness. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were truly on the same team. With the legal case against Lauren fully underway and Rebecca cleared of any wrongdoing, life began to settle into a new rhythm. It wasn't the life we had before, the cracks from the ordeal were still there, but it was something we were both learning to navigate together. Rebecca's work at the community center was a bright spot in our lives. She threw herself into her new role with a passion I hadn't seen in years, organizing food drives, mentoring at-risk youth, and coordinating resources for families in need. "It's not the kind of job I ever imagined for myself," she said one evening as we prepared dinner together. "But it feels good to do something that matters." "You're making a difference," I said, smiling as I chopped vegetables. "And you're happy?" "That's what counts." Her face softened, and she leaned over to kiss my cheek. "Thanks for sticking with me, Daniel. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm so grateful." "You're worth it," I said simply. Our therapy sessions became less frequent as we worked through the lingering tensions in our relationship. The trust that had been shattered wasn't fully repaired, but it was mending, piece by piece. "I still get scared sometimes," Rebecca admitted during one session. "That you'll wake up one day and realize I'm not worth the effort." I shook my head, reaching for her hand. "I already made my choice, Rebecca. I'm here because I believe in us. We are stronger than what happened." She smiled through her tears, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were finally on solid ground. Meanwhile, Marcus kept us updated on the fallout from Lauren's operation. "She's facing serious prison time," he said during one of his visits. "The evidence you helped provide was ironclad." There's no way out for her or her associates. Hearing that brought a sense of closure, though the scars from Rebecca's involvement would take longer to fade. You're lucky she cooperated, Marcus said, glancing at Rebecca. If you hadn't stepped up when you did, things could have ended very differently. Rebecca nodded, her expression somber. I don't feel lucky. I feel humbled. I'll never forget how close I came to losing everything. One evening, Rebecca handed me a letter she had written but hesitated to give me. I wrote this a while ago, she said, her voice trembling. When everything was at its worst. I didn't know if I'd ever have the courage to give it to you, but I want you to read it now. I opened the letter, her handwriting familiar and steady despite the rawness of the words. Daniel. I've made mistakes, ones I'll never stop regretting. I know I've hurt you, and I don't know if I can ever make up for that. But I want you to know that everything I did, every wrong choice, was rooted in fear. Fear of failure. Fear of losing you. Fear of facing my own shortcomings. You deserve better than the person I've been, but if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the person you deserve. I love you more than I can put into words, and I'll never stop fighting for us. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. I meant every word, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. I set the letter down and pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. We'll get through this. Together. As the months passed, we fell into a quieter, simpler life. We spent more time together, long walks, cooking experiments that often went hilariously wrong, and late-night conversations about everything and nothing. We learned to laugh again, to trust the silences between us, and to appreciate the small, ordinary moments that made up our days. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Rebecca turned to me with a soft smile. Do you think we've made it? She asked. I considered her question, the weight of everything we'd been through settling over me like a blanket. I think we are still making it, I said. But we are on the right path. She nodded, leaning her head on my shoulder. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, I realized that while our journey had been painful and messy, it had also been a testament to resilience and love. We weren't perfect, and we never would be. But we were stronger than before, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.